It's a team sport. So there are things we can do in our daily life or on our own that contribute to its cultivation. But mainly, it's something that we do in the company of others, or in the company of fellow practitioners. It is inherently based on the concept of relationship. Right? Bhakti is derived from the root bhaj, which means service, to serve. But it implies service that is offered with affection, with love, with the desire to please the person it is offered to. Right? Service may be of many types. Right? Service may be done without really caring whether it's pleasing to another person, or without really caring whether it's done properly. Or it may be done as an expression of love, as an expression of affection. Right? Just as, let's say, someone works at a restaurant, maybe their service is to clean the dishes or something. They're cleaning the dishes, you know. Maybe they're not taking so much care about that. Maybe they're not showing so much attention to detail. But then that same person, when they get home and they're expecting their friends and family over, then very carefully they're making sure everything is clean, and they're feeling excitement to be doing that very same activity that they were doing at their job without so much excitement. So bhakti is something like that. It is something like that activity of service and that sense of endearment, or that sense of trying to satisfy for whom the service is being done. So it is both an activity, and it is a way of seeing, and it is a state of intention within us. The ultimate recipient of that service is Krishna. And when we say Krishna, we mean the source from which all things come, and to whom all things are ultimately meant to return. And we mean the aspect of that source, or that center, that is entirely beautiful, loving, and trustworthy. That aspect that is existing really only to reciprocate with the love of others. So, to give of ourselves or serve that center is simultaneously the realization of our greatest potential, the greatest joy that we could ever feel, and the greatest duty and sacrifice we could perform. This is we can say the whole thing is beautiful, but if there were a silver lining or something that you needed to see why it's so good, then it would be something like this. That the greatest sacrifice is also the greatest joy. In ordinary life, these two things are the opposite. The sacrifice is the rough part, and the non-sacrifice, or the part where we take or consume, that's the joyful part. But we're saying these two actually are one and the same. And the vision, the understanding, the state of intention, all the things that are involved into conceiving and acting according to that principle, that is the path of bhakti. So it is simultaneously a very, very joyful thing. And if all we're concerned about, if you're just out and out concerned with yourself, if you're just really want whatever's best for you, you really want it, you'll ultimately come to this conclusion. And if on the opposite side, you are completely selfless, and all you want to do is whatever is good for others, or whatever is good for the world, or whatever is good for a particular person, any other. If you really, really, really want to do that, you'll also end up at the same point. All these things converge in this point, this perfect realization of our potential, which is both the most fulfilling and wholesome service to the whole that we are a part of, and the most joyful and thrilling activity for ourselves. To have a way that we could progress towards that every day, would that make our life nice? That would be awesome. That would make every day worth living. That would make every morning some good reason to finally get out of bed. Or to get out of bed early, in fact. Right? And let's say in the course of such a day, we meet with some difficulties. We meet with some setbacks. Then we would have a worthy cause to kind of, shake it off and keep going and not get so disturbed about what happened. Like let's say you're going on the road and you're moving and some rude driver cuts you off or something like that. And then some people, they become very angry. They have some road rage. I was in this lane. I had the right of way. You went into my lane. And they, become very angry. And sometimes, you'll see even people at the next stoplight or the next interchange, they pull up, and they're making hand gestures and calling things out the window or taking down the license plate, these kind of things. But let's suppose that same situation you're in, but you're on your way to some event that's really, really important to you. You're a performer and you have a huge audience waiting, or your relative and friend is really ill and they need to be taken care of, or something, then do you have time to even think about this person? Do you have time to even bother with that? There's no time for that. Forget about it in a moment, because there's something so much more valuable and important that needs to be done. So, if we can understand the central importance, the great importance of engaging in the practice of bhakti, then so many things happen in our life, it's kind of like, okay, maybe it was unpleasant, maybe it was a problem, maybe it wasn't so nice, but what's the big deal? When we have something so great to be doing and focusing on, why should we stop and allow ourselves to be distracted with these other elements? So really, just to have that prospect in our life can actually alleviate so many of our difficulties. Especially Western, countries, modern day, we're not short of the essentials of life. We have houses, we have food, we have society, we have transportation, we have all of these things. We live lives that are more pampered and luxurious than the royalty of the past. Right? The greatest, richest royalty of even a short time ago, they didn't have the kind of food, the kind of showers, the kind of houses that we had. And we're just simple people, we're just ordinary people. And they definitely didn't have this kind of technology, a means to communicate, all of these things. So, relatively speaking, we're living in such an abundance of ample facility. And if in the midst of that we have this wonderful cause for which to live and to direct our attention to, then what's wrong? What's such a big difficulty in our life? Right? The only difficulty would be stuff that just distracts us and somehow enables us to forget all that great stuff that we already have. So just to conceive the path, just to feel that connection with the path is itself a huge development. It's an extraordinary thing, right? And anyone who reaches that, they are blessed. They are very fortunate. Because it is said that the truth is self-evident. And by that, it is meant that the truth makes itself known. Right? There's two ways this can be understood. If we say, this is a self-evident thing, then does it mean that we fundamentally have the capacity to recognize what it is, and for that reason it's self-evident? Or does it mean that that thing has the ability to make itself known to us, regardless of who we are, and therefore it is self-evident? The distinction is clear. It's self-evident because of its virtue or because of ours. So when we say the truth is self-evident, we say it is because of the virtue within the truth, because the truth contains within it the capacity to make itself known. So it is more like a catch than a grab, to put it simply. It's something we can receive, that we can grasp, but not something that we can take, or that's there for us to grab with using our strength. It's not our strength that will enable us to get it. It's our receptivity. It's our openness to receive or to move according to what we need to do to catch it. If you're playing football, like American football, and then the wide receiver is running his route, and the guy is like throws the ball, then if the guy's running his route, like 3 steps up, 45 degrees, 6 steps up, turn, and if the play is like on the 3rd step, the ball's going to be there if you're the one he's going to pick to throw it to. So you're like, and then you're right there, but then the ball is like going another step ahead of you. Then what does the guy do? Does he say like, this guy doesn't know how to throw it properly, and just let the ball go? His job is like grab the ball, otherwise the other team's gonna get it. His job is, of course, to follow the route, but even within the route, to immediately adjust in an instant to whatever he's got to do to actually get the ball, right? So in spiritual life, it's a bit like that. There's some track that we can follow to go, but then even within the track, we've got to have this attitude of like, okay, however do I got to spin, do I got to twist, do I got to reach, do I got to, any kind of move, I'm ready to make the move to get the ball, And when that guy is like, making a diving catch or something like that, is he thinking in his mind like, this sucks, man. This is so dumb. I have to get all grass stains on my pants and like roll on the ground again. He's like loving it. He's like, and it's like, that's like, he'll make $1 million if he like catches that ball at the right moment and gets a touchdown. Oh yeah, that's the best moment of his life, that the ball was thrown inaccurately. He would have scored the touchdown if the ball was thrown accurately. But the fact that the throw is a little inaccurate and he made a diving catch, that's fantastic. So that can be our attitude in spiritual life. It's not that we are going to expect, the higher reality to just come like a regulated, stripped, forced thing, like it's exactly like this, it's exactly like that, but rather we're excited to say, is it this side, is it on that side, what kind of move can I make to grasp what it is? How can I best be a receiver of that? This is an analogy with football, but this phrase our Gurudev often used, to make ourselves a proper receiver. This is what we can do. To come in the proper channel and be a proper receiver. If we can do that, then we're in the flow, or we're connected, and we're feeling the fulfillment of spiritual life, which is of such nature that when people start to feel it, it makes them disinterested in every other kind of happiness. Like sometimes we'll talk to people. Like just a couple of days ago, I was talking to a fellow, and we're having a talk about devotion and the joy found in the life of devotees. And then he said, well, that's cool, you guys, you're like happy with this and that, and but I like to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm happy with that. So what's the difference? You're trying to be happy, I'm trying to be happy, you are happy, I am happy. So, like, kind of like, almost ending like, do we even need to talk anymore? Like, why don't we just go have tea? Like, it's all kind of like obvious. Like that kind of attitude. And it's a little. To say that because the presence of something is in two places, that the two things are equal, even though the presence of the thing is in vastly greater quantity in one place than another. For example, let's say I need some water, and somebody says, oh, well, there's a little puddle out back. You could probably, soak up like a quart of water out of there with like a rag. And if you soaked it in the puddle, you could squeeze it out and you'd get like a quart. Okay. And this other guy's like, all right, well, there's a big lake out over here, a couple 100 meters, and there's as much water as you could ever use. Okay. So the guy thinks, all right, well, these two are the same. There's water over here, there's water over there. What's the difference? No difference, it's all good. I'll just go, put my rag in the mud and, get my quart of water. Nobody does that. Nobody goes to the puddle when there's a lake. So similarly, there may be happiness in path A, there may be happiness in path B, but according to the accessibility, abundance, quality, and quantity of the thing, people may obviously prefer one to another. So we see that persons who discover the abundance of happiness found in the path of devotion, they, very readily they lose interest in what can be found in smaller pursuits. This is an analogy given in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that the purposes that are fulfilled by many different ponds can all be fulfilled by a large reservoir. Means if you have a large reservoir, you can do whatever you needed to be done with having 1 pond, 2 ponds, 3 ponds, 4. This forms the underlying basis, the foundation that inspires us to say, yes, let's live a life in a spiritual way every day. Let's make every action we perform, every thought that we have, every word that we speak, something in pursuit of that. So that's the general structure that's given for the practice. Can be divided into what is done with the body, what is done with the mind, and what is done with words. That devotion can be cultivated in all of these ways. And the broadest notion is given in the Bhagavad Gita, where it says, Jad karoshi yadashnasi, yaj jahosi dadasi yadyat tapasyasi konteya, tad karusha mararpanam. That where it is said, whatever you eat, whatever you do, whatever you give away, whatever austerity you tolerate or do, whatever it is that you do that as an offering. Do that with the intention of satisfying the Supreme. No particular distinction. Whatever you do it with that intention. This is the broadest scope. In other words, really, it begins in the heart. It begins on the conscious plane, and then is expressed in a physical way. Let's illustrate the opposite. If you go into building number 1, and in language number 2, perform ritual number 3, you are attaining spiritual benefit number 4. We believe it. It's true. Okay, that may be. But if I go into building number 2 and I do the same other 3 parts, will I get the same benefit? No, And what about if I stay in building number 1, but I use language number 2? No! What about building number 1, language number 2, but process number 4? No! Oh, okay. So, persons may have a formulaic idea that only this exact specific set of things may have any tangible benefit for us. So here in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord is, glazing beyond all of these things and saying, whatever you do, however you say it, whatever it may be, if it has this intention, if its purpose is devotion, then it is devotion. This is a necessary, very broad foundation to lay. But if we say, okay, great, so therefore I can do anything, and I can say that it's an act of devotion, and therefore whatever I do is devotion. So I can, hang upside down from trees, because I think it's cool, and that's my way, of adoring the divine, is that head rush, that blood that goes to your head when you hang. Oh yeah, that just really gives me that spiritual focus. I've heard stranger things than we talked about some very strange things out there. So if we leave it at that broad foundation, we may end up with some very odd and unnecessary things. So that we give a little more shape, a little more style to it, is very nice. It's very good. And another principle, another central principle, we can, now is the holiday season. Everyone is thinking about Christmas gifts and things like this. So everybody wants to give whom they love something that they want. Nobody wants to end up giving you some gift that you wouldn't really have wanted anyway. Everybody wants to give you the thing that you'll actually really appreciate and use or value or whatever it may be. So similarly, if really we want to express devotion, then the idea of asking, what do you like? Or trying to find out what you might prefer, this is very natural. This is a very normal thing to do, right? So then we can say, well, how should we eat? And how should we talk? And how should we walk? And what is it? How can we do these things in a way that will be most pleasing? And then we can do that. So how do we find out? Then the best way is to ask the people who know. Right? I mean, it sounds silly, why do we even have to mention that, But strangely enough, some people think, well, if I want to know, I need to go, sit in the forest and, look at the leaves and feel the energy of nature. And then whatever comes into my mind at that moment, that must be it. Okay, we can appreciate the attempt, the fact that you're trying to find out. Right on. Right on, you're trying to find out, But rather than, taking up this, we can say, freestyle method, to consult with someone who has deep experience of that thing, that will be highly efficient. So that brings us to the sadhu. That brings us to the persons who are living a whole life of divine service and who are following or engaging in that service according to what has been revealed from the higher plane, revealed from ultimately that source, the Lord Himself, what it is that's pleasing. So if we can embrace that act and those methods, then we can be highly confident. We can get much enthusiasm that if we have the right intention and we have a desirable way of expressing it, that we're well on the way to succeeding in rendering some devotion, or making an act of devotion. Let's say we have a friend in common, and I say, do you know what friend number one would like for Christmas? And you say, well, the other day we were out for a walk, and they were talking about how it was getting quite cold, and I noticed that they didn't have a scarf. I think they would like a scarf. Are you sure? Do you know if they have any other scarves? Well, I'll check. You see that friend number, did you find out that, no, they don't have any scarves, and I can tell he needs a scarf. Okay, I got it. Now I got a good Christmas present for my friend. I'm going to get him a scarf. Very nice. If we can identify, if we can find that kind of thing, then would we say, oh, this person who's going to go buy his friend a scarf, God, that's so unimaginative. That's so boring. Just getting this person what they want. Oh man, they're just losing their individuality. They're just sacrificing their agency and just going along monotonously with what someone else says. That's so lame. Will we harshly analyze this like that? No, right? Typically we find this endearing. This is nice, So, but strangely enough, when it comes to spiritual things, if we say, well, in the revealed scriptures, in the association of the sadhus, we found that these are particular ways that we can render devotional service to the Lord. And someone says, dude, why are you just following some rituals and some pre-formulated package of everything? Why don't you, find something authentic and real for you? Well, then we'll say, well, I think that's what I'm already doing. Because for me, what I really feel is that I actually want to serve this person. I actually want to love this person. So with that serious desire in my heart, I've gone about finding a way that I can do that, and now I'm doing that. I feel quite free and happy to be expressing my freedom in this way, or according to this guideline. I'm quite happy with that. And the fact that you think I'm like conforming or losing something, it seems to me that your idea is it's more about me doing something that I might want than really making happy the person who we're talking about. So thus we see in the scope of popular spirituality or religion or whatever you want to call it, that some persons are more on this free-form side, some persons are more in this fixed, formulaic side, and that the ideal thing is to find the right balance of these two, wherein we can adopt the methods and the means that have been taught by the avatars, the sadhus, the scriptures, and at the same time do so with full heart and with the full realization of devotional life as the perfect utilization of our free will. And when we have those things together, then we have something vigorous. We have something joyful. We have something that we're both confident in, that we're enthusiastic about, and that is new and a process of learning within ourselves how to best do that. So this is like a broad structure. And then if we zoom into the specifics, then in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's here on our altar, right? He said that of all ways that we can offer devotion to the Lord, the simplest, most universal and joyful way is chanting the name of the Lord, what he called Harinam Sankirtan, which means to join together with our friends, with our community and a congregation, and chant the divine names. Children can do it, the elderly can do it, the rich, the poor, the east, the west, doesn't matter. Anyone, anywhere can do it. It's simple and it's joyful. And so he gave that as the simple, most broad and universal process. So if we want to talk about practicing Bhakti Yoga in our daily life, then here we go, top of the list. wherever we are, in the midst of our daily life, we can always engage in chanting the name of the Lord. This is always a source of joy and peace and shelter. And side by side, the next best thing we can do, or rather, the thing that is most beneficial of all, is to also regularly join with other persons engaged in the path of bhakti, and in their company perform activities that are for the satisfaction of the Lord. That, in other words, the Lord loves teamwork. He loves to see people work together with humility and happiness for Him. This is very, very endearing to Him. There is a saying, a Western saying that Gurudev liked, where it says, if you love me, love my dog. And if you love me, then accept me as I am. Just accept me, and what's dear to me, it should be dear to you also. So, if we're going to live together, then you're going to have to like what I eat, because we're going to eat together. And I live with my dog, so you're going to have to live with my dog too. And, I snore, or I do this, or I do that, and well, here we are. This is how it is. So if you love me, you got to love all this too. So we can say the most prominent thing is that if we really want to have this spiritual connection, and we really want to engage in devotional service, then the thing that's the inevitable integral part of that is the company of other devotees. And that the more we can learn to appreciate and assist and collaborate with the other devotees, the more we're able to do things that are pleasing to the Lord. And the more those things are enriched because of that collaborative expression. And it is really in community that all of our shortcomings get teased out. Maybe literally teased, or maybe figuratively teased, but they come out in the course of communication, practical dealings, organization, so many things. And while that may be a bit rocky or bumpy from time to time, on the whole it's really a good thing. Right? One analogy is given that if you throw a whole bunch of rocks in a sack and you shake it up, then all those rocks are bumping into each other. They might be having a rough time. But ultimately all the rocks get polished. They become more beautiful as a result. So if devotees join together and they collaborate in service, then there's naturally some polishing. Nice way to describe it, a little euphemistic. Little polishing is going on. In other words, they're clashing like anything. No, it's polishing. Polishing. But, ultimately it's beautiful. So Mahaprabhu, the gist of his conception, Saru Sange Krishna Nam, Emotra Chai Sangsar Jinite Har Kono Bostu Nai. That I want to chant the name of Krishna in the company of the sadhus. In other words, I want to be with the sadhus, I want to render service in the company of the devotees, and I want to chant the name of Krishna. This is all I want. If I have this, I have everything. This is really the compressed essence of things. And what do we require to do that? We don't require anything. It can happen anywhere, at any time, in any place. We just require that presence of that spirit of devotion and that clear vision of the higher nature of existence. So, what fuels our engagement in that is our ongoing hearing, our ongoing in the company of the devotees, or from lectures, or from literature, to remind ourselves of the beauty of that, the dignity of that, the value of that. That will give fuel to our ongoing engagement in it. And then the two will support each other, and we will make progress in our spiritual life. So, on a daily level, we can take some time to chant the name of the Lord. We can take some time to hear the teachings, hear the inspirational messages found according to the system of the path of Bhakti. And whenever possible, maybe on a daily level, maybe on a weekly level, maybe on a monthly level, maybe on a yearly level, but we will say, I will take time to join with the devotees. I will take time to participate in events together where we can collaborate to render service. And that may be in a practical sense. Maybe we cook, maybe we serve, maybe we do worship, maybe we chant. It can be anything. It's free form. The only requirement is that it's necessary, that it's part of the thing, then it is. So thus, anything can become spiritual if it has that service connection. This is very, very broad, powerful principle. And not that it has to be in one culture, or one place, or one thing. Anything, anywhere, can actually be part of our means of transcending this world, or transcending this illusory world. Even things that might be right in the very simplest or plainest form of worldly activity. When it's done with the chanting of the name of Krishna, when it's done in that spirit of devotion, in connection with the devotees, then it becomes part of in the process of enlightenment. And also, within that, lastly I'll say, that if we can have some simple time in our day, typically at the beginning of the day, when before we engage in so many practical activities, when we can stop and we can, from our heart, we can dedicate our time, ourself, our thoughts, our intentions to devotion, to the service of the Lord. And maybe that can take place in the form of having an altar, making an offering, but mainly every day to come and to conceive that I am an eternal soul. My highest potential is found in engaging in the loving service of the Lord and all that is dear to Him. So please bless me, accept me, enable me to do that on this day. I want everything that I do to be for that purpose. Some very simple, heartfelt prayer like this. And then maybe we cook something and we make an offering, or maybe we offer some incense, or maybe we just bow, whatever it may be, but that act is very essential and very purifying for us. So if every day in the morning or at some point we can take time to do that, and if we also chant a few of the kirtans that we have here, or we take some time to read something of the teachings, then this will give us very helpful structure. And in time, many people, they find that some structure is very, very helpful. Right? In the absolute sense, it's not essential, but it's extremely helpful. So, to establish that in our life, in other words, some discipline, that will also be very beneficial for us. In English, what we may call dualism and non-dualism, or non-dualism also sometimes known as monism, in the sense of mono or singular. And in Indian philosophy, this is known as Dvaitavad and Advaitavad, and then there are many different styles or specific ways that that's understood. There's what's called Keval Advaitavad, which means exclusive non-dualism. And then that's contrasted with like Ramanuja's philosophy, which is called Bashishta Advaitavad, which means qualified monism. So if we say there's a non-dual reality, there's only one reality, and then, well, what do you mean by that? And then, well, that's, like, we mean that exclusively. And then there's people say, well, we mean that in a qualified sense. And then you have another school like Dvaitavad. And then, well, what kind of dualism? Well, then one other guy says, Shuddha Dvaitavad, pure dualism, total dualism. And then you've got another school that's called Dvait Advaitavad, which means dualistic non-dualism. And then people are going, what? It's both, And then what Mahaprabhu's philosophy is called is achintya beda beda siddhanta, which means like inconceivable dualism and non-dualism. Like it's both, and it's beyond the human mind to conceive anyway. So it's a little bit kind of like all these things come up, and then it's kind of just like, no. Like you're not gonna get it all into one little theory or one way of seeing it. It's something that's beyond any kind of ism or theory that we're ultimately going to describe. So what this line of thought leads us to is something like coming to what is a known unknown, where there's something that we don't know, but we don't know that we don't know it. In other words, we're thinking we know, but we're actually wrong. And then there's what you call a known unknown, which means we don't know what that is, but we know that we don't know it, and we're not thinking that we do. Right? Okay, I hope this isn't too dry, mentally here. But then, so to qualify this concept as achintya, which means inconceivable, means that this reality is bigger than our mind. It's bigger than what we can theorize. If the whole world were to conform to our theory, then the world would be a lesser thing than our mind. So are we a part of a whole that's bigger than us, or is the whole something that's smaller and within us? This is a question. People debate it, right? So a theistic attitude, or what we would call a progressive attitude, is the assumption that amongst all things that exist, I'm the greatest. We find this maybe initially it can produce a thrill, but in the long run, it's got a bit of a cap on things. It kind of walls you off a little bit to to everything else that might be good. So what about the idea of there's a reality in which I am the smallest unit? And somebody might say, well, that would suck. I would just be, trampled and messed up and, knocked around. That would be terrible. Right? Okay. Well, what if it was a reality that I was the smallest part and it was a happy reality? What if it was a good reality? Then everything around me would be a constant source of wonder. Everything around me would be fantastic. And there'd be an ever new, more wonderful thing to experience at every moment. I think that would be really great. So these are the extremes, right? You've got the people who want to think there's a reality that's inherently bad, and I'm the best thing that you can find within that. That's like this is a cruel, bitter, rough world, but at least I'm like the guy who really understands the way that it is, and I really have it straight, and all these other people with hope and faith. Man, this is like the bane of society. You got this end over here, and then you got the other end over here saying, I'm the tiniest particle of an infinitely beautiful reality that I've only begun to experience. So, optimism, pessimism, where would you like to line up? How would you like to proceed? That's up to you. I'll leave it up to you. But to get directly back to our subject of dualism and non-dualism, then this question is there of whether reality is a decentralized thing or is a closed system or a holistic, complete unit. And for some people they say, well, we don't know, we can't know, no point in even talking about it. And others, they may say, well, we don't know and we can't know, but depending on the attitude that we form, we can experience it as such. That the way we see it will color the way we experience it. So if we want to experience this thing that's beyond our experience in a positive way, we need to have a positive view of what it is. So what kind of positive view shall we take? Then these kind of notions crop up. Is it non-dual or dual? Is it one or many? And then some people say, well, it's one. In other words, I want to talk about the thing that encompasses all things beyond which there is nothing. What you call the absolute, or the ultimate plane of existence. Let's try to talk about that. Let's direct our focus there. Okay, cool. So, in that absolute plane, whatever it may be, is there more than one thing? Is there life? Right? Then some, they say no. The absolute ultimate thing is just one substance in a perfect state of peace. And all the variety, differentiation, animation, excitement, new, old, happy, sad, all the colors and richness of life, that's all like this foam, this very superficial stuff, and really like there's this vast sea of peace. That all this stuff is very superficial. So we want to tap in to that vast steadiness or fixedness of all things and leave behind all the suffering that comes as soon as we're seeing I and you and me and up and down and good and bad. All these ideas, they're all just projections onto this. And really they're making us suffer, so let's just stop projecting anything and let's just be whatever it is that it is. And that's it. So that kind of attitude leads to what they call Keval Advaitavad, or pure non-dualism, where it's like there's just ultimately one thing, and everything is that. So any conception of a thing is wrong in the sense that it's just a distinction that's actually not necessary to be there, and as soon as you can stop making those distinctions, you'll be in the thing that always was anyway. So there's so many gurus, lineages, mantras, meditations, so many things meant to help people experience reality in that way. And many of the popular forms of yoga, meditation, and so on are taught by persons who maybe openly or maybe a little shroudedly are of that strain of thought and aspiration. Then we can move towards what they call what if we say, okay, there is this total complete substance that is outside of which nothing exists, but within it, what if some of the movement or dynamic or differentiation or distinctions that we experience within them, what if those things aren't really bad? What if there could be a type of those things that's good? And they say, well, all we've ever experienced of those kind of distinctions is that they're all temporary. All one form, it comes to exist and then it erodes, and another thing exists and then it disappears. So how could having any differentiation, how could having any distinction or any ideas of these things really be synonymous with happiness or a complete and steady state of being? Okay, well, what if this absolute reality is made up of both all that we've experienced with our senses and all that we have not? And what if in that region that we've yet to experience, there are these distinctions between things, but that in that yet to be experienced realm in which there are distinctions, those distinctions aren't temporary and they don't produce suffering, but rather they create the potential for relationships and exchanges of love and joy. So when this idea came onto the philosophical battlefield, so to speak, then some people, they went, where did you get that? No, don't go there. Right? But other people, they went, hey, that's really good. That's a fantastic idea. We haven't dealt with that before. All the refutation of the idea of duality has all been based on the dualities of physical existence. But dualities existing within spiritual existence, that's a whole dimension we've never even scratched the surface of. Whoa. So then we can say, philosophically speaking, then this big flow started going in that direction. But there were some who resisted that and said, no. Like, it can't be. It doesn't exist. It's just not. That's also just an imagination of your mind. It's just a false pursuit that really is going to bubble down into this fundamental thing that we're into in the first place. So, like, don't fall for it. And then the question becomes, could that notion of the differentiated spiritual nature, is that just an idea in our material mind that is another distraction from the underlying fundamental non-dual nature of things? Or could that really exist in and of itself? How do we know that it's there or not, or it's just some question of our mind? Well, we can say, the mind's not the one who's going to answer that question for us. The mind's not going to tell us what only exists in our mind or not. So the question then becomes, do we want to explore? Do we want to see if that differentiated spiritual reality exists or not? Is it worth trying to find out? Or should we just settle for soup, so to speak, or settle for this like static state of peace? So in other words, are you willing to risk perpetuating your state of material suffering and delaying or even denying yourself the peace and serenity of basic spiritual consciousness because of this prospect of discovering dynamic, ecstatic spiritual existence that's beyond that state of peace? Well, people have different views, right? There's a famous we were talking about John Muir last night. Who's the other guy? Robert Frost. And he has this poem, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Right? So, there's a famous poem called The Road Less Traveled. So when the roads show up, you can say, well, this looks like the sure, easy path, and that looks like the less traveled, unknown path. And then, which way do you go? Well, some people go this way, and some people go that way, don't they? It's up to you. So if we say, here we are in the temple of Mahaprabhu, and we can say, we took the less traveled path, and then we took the steep angle climb, and then we ditched out of the switchbacks, and we went right up the peak. And we went, this potential, this prospect of spiritual differentiated reality is so great, I want to go directly that way, and I don't care about any delay or other notion of anything. What is it that compels someone to say, yes, I want to be fully committed to the most developed conception, to the most extreme conception of spiritual variety and the potential for spiritual personality, relationship, and love? This is the point that we have to answer. This is the thing in our life, right? Why would we want to take this quote-unquote risk? or invest so much in that way. Right? Then, as the common saying goes, is it better to have loved and lost, or never loved at all? Is it better to have tried and then, well, it didn't work out, or is it better to say, nah, I don't think so? Right? So this is the ultimate notion of that idea. That this idea of selfless love is so appealing, it feels so wholesome in our hearts, that the idea that it is not inherently related to the absolute reality and is also only some deluding feature of a lower nature, it just doesn't sit. It just can't be. This is the feeling in the hearts of the devotees. While the consequences of becoming attached to the temporary and to all the things that can transform or go other than the way we want in material existence, while that carries so many consequences, right? And is no guarantee of peace or rest or assurance or security, right? Then we can say there's a type of people who say, well, I don't think peace and security is my ultimate aim. I'd rather undergo risk. I'd rather undergo loss and go through the experience of love, go through the experience of giving of myself. And that really feels like a more complete and a more fulfilling utilization of my free will than to simply negate that it exists and do nothing, or try to minimize it to the greatest extent possible. That all this differentiation in the world, the whole point of it is just to turn it off, just to conceptually explode it into nothing, and aspire to be of consciousness no greater than the rocks that we walk on. That's the whole aim of life. That's the great secret of life. No! No! Rather, all these things must be meant to cultivate something positive and something progressive, and that there must be some essence within this world of the real nature of that dynamic, eternal, spiritual world. And to live that, to experience that, to use the freedom, the facility that we have in this life to learn how to live and love in that spiritual plane in the future, that makes sense. That gives dignity and meaning to every feature of the material environment. That's not simply, something that's deluding or redundant. So, in the words of our Param Gurudev, he said, simply to be on the path in pursuit of the highest truth is itself the greatest joy. Let alone even attaining it. The value of the path is so great, even that excels the joy or the fulfillment found in any other lesser attainment. The process is already better than the other goal. Right? Well, how do you know? How do you know that? Why are you saying that? There's only one way to find out. To do it. You have to try it. You have to experience it for yourself. It's like children. They don't want to eat this or they don't want to eat that. I can say for myself. I refused to eat pizza until I was like 12. I was very stubborn. Right? So many little kid birthday parties, like pizza party. I'm like, oh no. My parents are like, you would really like pizza. Why don't you just try it? No, I don't want to eat pizza. I don't know. I refused until I was like 10 or 12. So many pizza parties. Like sitting there, all my friends are all like, with the stringy cheese, and I'm just like, And then finally, one time I just try it. And then immediately I recognize, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So many pizza parties. So many pizza parties I went to. What was I thinking? You know? It's so good. You know? I remember that moment, the first time I ate pizza, I was like, man, I'm so stubborn, I'm so stupid. Really, I felt stupid at that moment in my life. Then in spiritual life, how much joy is found in devotion? People have so many arguments, so many speculations, it's like this, no, it's not like that, no, it couldn't be, no, it isn't. Just try it. Just try it and see how it feels. Right? And you'll have that experience. Oh my gosh, it is so good. For us, love is meant for Krishna. Love is meant for the supreme original source from which all things come. That He is the primary object of love in the life of every living being. And whatever experience of love we can find in this material plane, we can find infinitely more in a loving relationship with Him.
Speaking about finding love with your Lord to Krishna, where it all comes from, for me, I would find love within my family, and this is where I get my spiritual guidance from, if you see what I'm saying.
How is that spiritual? What do you define as spiritual?
I find that as that you're willing to give yourself, of course, to help your family in an uncommitted way, I suppose. Or you commit yourself, I think, what's the word, in an unconditional, thank you, in an unconditional way, that you want to see that person grow into a better person.
Sure.
And within yourself, as you're giving, you'll get something back.
But the spiritual part?
The spiritual part, surely you brought someone into the world.
What's that?
You brought someone into the world, which is surely the whole world, universe, and my thing is spiritual, isn't it? Everything is one. If you see what I'm saying.
I think I see. I can share with you that that as presented by our gurus, the worldview that we have is that this world is made of matter. And the people, the thoughts, the feelings, the life forms, the air, the clouds, the trees, the birds, the sky is all made of matter. And the ups and the downs and the passion and Romeo and Juliet and all of these things. Exactly. This is all material. None of it is spiritual.
Okay.
Other than the presence of spiritual living beings inside of that. By that I mean that life is an inherent property of the soul, not of matter. Matter is not living. So we have spiritual beings playing the role of material life forms, or they're animating. As an actor puts on a costume, a soul puts on a body. Right? In the words of Shakespeare, what is that? There's that famous saying that the world is but a stage, and man are its players, or something like that. I can't remember how it is. Do you know that line?
Yes. But actors upon it.
Actors upon a stage, that kind of thing. So the actor is the soul, and the body is the costume.
I understand.
Okay, so no, any attachment that we form to another person in this world is part of the play. It's part of the external thing. It's not actually something that's inherently spiritual. Something spiritual is between one soul and the supreme soul, or the higher nature, that's not physically perceivable in this world. So spiritual relationship is with another spiritual entity on a spiritual level.
So do you think that that's for the individual? Personally, I see that there are various different types of spirituality. There's family spirituality, there's individual spirituality.
I mean, in popular speak, the word spirituality is something that is sort of, people are allowed to use it and define it for themselves. And I'm not really going to pick at that, but from our perspective, what, as far as our principle of spiritual, as is taught by our gurus, we would say none of that is spiritual. As soon as it's my spirituality and your spirituality, and as far as we're concerned, it's nobody's.
Right.
Because spiritual truth is not relative to your mental opinions, your mind being a material thing. So any sentence that start with like, for me it's like this, like as soon as we're hearing that, we're thinking, nah. In the sense that what's actually spiritual is something that's eternally true. And true in the life of every being in eternity. And it's something that we can be made known to us. It's something that's revealed to us. It's not something that we have the ability to dissect and scrutinize and be opinionated about. But as soon as we're ready to, so to speak, pop the balloon of our opinions and receive this higher understanding of things by grace, through prayer, through the sense of, I can't understand, I don't have the ability, unless it is made known to me, I will never know. Unless we can approach with that kind of stark humility, we haven't scratched the surface yet. We're still like churning, the world of philosophy and opinion and whim and emotion and so many things.
Do you feel like you have a goal
I can say we do have a goal, yes. And that goal is love. As an eternal ideal. That really love is such a great thing. It's such a noble thing. It's such a high thing. It's not that, we would be ashamed to say, I have love, or I'm able to love. We would say, I've been trying and trying and trying, and still I've never really loved. True love is so noble. A little bit, a simple way of putting it, like we met a fellow in Hungary a little while ago, and he was from Israel, wasn't he? You remember that guy? And one event we had, and one fellow, he's there, and then he said, he's from Israel. He said, I'm from Israel. And someone asked him, maybe you asked him, someone asked him, oh, do you know Hebrew? And he said, and he smiled, and he said, no. He said, I can speak some Hebrew, but I'll never say that I'm fluent in Hebrew, because that would be disrespectful to the language. The language is so deep and profound and has so many nuanced meaning, to go around saying, I'm fluent in Hebrew. Like, how could I say that? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So love, it's an incredible thing. It's a vast and profound thing. Oh, I love so and so. I have, it's as if I'm fully conversant with all of that. We're talking, in our present, like, simple daily dealings, we might say to someone, I love you, or something. That's another thing. But in principle, in a full sense, we'll think that love is an ideal. It's an unattainable aspiration that we ongoingly seek, knowing we'll never actually reach it. And just to be engaged in trying to reach it is itself the beauty of life.
Living up to ideals you can never reach.
Yeah. And not getting low self-esteem and like getting confused and like, what am I doing? Not like that. But rather, having that ideal and like the thrill of never reaching it and trying again and again and seeing how deep, how far, how unlimited it goes. Right now we're talking about an ideal of spiritual love. And that love is exchanged between the Supreme Soul and individual souls, such as all of us. That's the main subject. Karma is the opposite of that. Karma is actions that are not loving. Actions that are meant to attain a particular result for myself. So, the more we can learn that spirit of unconditional love and make acts of love, those acts don't produce or entangle us in the cycle of karma. But all acts not for that ideal do. So karma means experiencing the consequences of our actions. So the more we take, the more we have to give back. It's like going into a building, let's say a facility. Let's say you go to a hotel and there's towels and soap and everything you need, and there's recreation and there's tennis courts and hockey sticks and paraphernalia for every kind of hobby. And while you're there, you can use all of that. But you can't take any of it with you when you leave. And the more of it you use, the more your bill goes up. And then when you're done, you have to pay for all of it. So it's all right there. Look, this is my stuff. Look at that land over there. Let's just go live there and make a flag. And if anyone comes, we'll say, no, this is mine, and don't touch it or we kill you. And let's get a whole bunch of people to think the same, and let's call it a country. And then let's educate everybody to think that that's dignity. Sorry, I don't want to go off on nationalism right now, but that's what's going on. None of this belongs to anybody. All of this belongs to God. And it's all meant to be used for God. And any idea that it's mine, I'm entitled to use it, and think that I won't ultimately have to return it, and also reimburse the consequences or the significance of me using it for that amount of time, this is what perpetuates people in the cycle of karma. So the alternative to that is really great, right? It's not like, oh, this sucks, so we'll do something else that's also rough. Rather, we've got this great alternative, which is infinitely better than it in the first place, which is to love and serve Krishna, which is simultaneously more fulfilling and more wholesome. So spirituality proper means that, to understand our true self as an eternal soul that exists independent of this body and exists eternally, even longer than the stars, the clouds, the sky, the universe. We've been around longer than the sun, the moon, the stars, the M7 galaxy, the Milky Way. These are like tiny new things to us as eternal souls. These are small matters in eternity and infinity. And to realize ourselves as that eternal soul and engage in our eternal relationship with the Lord, with Krishna. And also to relate to others on that level as other eternal souls, not just the roles we play in the earthly plane. That is to cultivate spirituality. And that's there, and that's valid, and that's fulfilling for everybody. And it doesn't require people to consider it a relative thing of their own, right? It's to appreciate that is something that's revealed. It's not relative to me. It's something I'm blessed to understand by divine grace. And all others who are blessed to that extent, they'll also come to that understanding. Of course, there may be nuances and subtleties of difference, but there is an inherent higher nature that we're going to experience. So, anyway, just that difference between the culture of revelation and the culture of relativism. It's grounded, as long as it's my truth, it's your truth, it's thinking truth is a product of the material thinking function. Whereas the premise of spirituality is that it's something that's coming from the spirit plane, which is beyond the relative nature of things.
Thought and everything.
Exactly.